and can start recording. Awesome. We are recording. So while people trickle in, I will provide a quick introduction to our speaker, and then we'll get things started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the keynote session. We're so fortunate this year to have Dr. Lynda Kellam for our speaker. Dr. Kellam is one of the founding organizers of the Data Rescue Project. And this project began earlier this year in February to mitigate the loss of important public US government data, which mysteriously started disappearing. And her talk titled Saving What Counts will provide us with important lessons that they're learning from this project. And I think these are lessons that are relevant to all data librarians today. In her day job, Dr. Kellam is the Snyder-Grenader Director of Research, Data, and Digital Scholarship at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. She holds an MLIS as well as an MA in Political Science and a doctorate in American History. Dr. Kellam has written and presented extensively on data services, data management, government information, all the stuff that SEDLS loves. And she's definitely a leader in the field. She currently serves as Secretary of iAssist, which is an international data professional organization. She's also served in many other leadership capacities within ALA, ACRL, and GODORG. She brings such a wealth of expertise and leadership to our profession, and we are so glad to have you here, Dr. Kellam. So with that, I will hand the mic over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's exciting to be here with you today. And I've actually been able to block off a lot of my time to be able to attend a bunch of the sessions this week. So I'm excited to see the agenda and talk with all of you. So yes, I'm here today as a founding organizer of the Data Rescue Project, which is a national initiative focused on rescuing and preserving at-risk federal data. Our mission is to rescue data sets from potential loss and work towards the continued accessibility and sustainability of federal public data. Our goal is to save what counts. I'm sure some of you have seen information about us over the past 9 months in response to concerns about federal public data. We've done a lot of presentations. I know people are probably getting sick of hearing me talk, but the whole point of this is really just to raise awareness of what's going on and also to give people an outlet to be able to respond to what's happening. We've been quite active, especially in the librarian community. We've assisted with the rescue of over 1,000 data sets. And when I say that, it doesn't mean that we just rescued 1,000 data sets. We've worked with other groups to try and figure out the best way to preserve these data sets over the long term. And other forms of government information. So while we were focused on data sets, it expanded outward to a lot of other kinds of government information. These efforts have focused on various agencies, and we've been working with a large amount of data. Finally, we successfully organized a group of dedicated volunteers across several initiatives, many of whom I actually see in this room today, who have been part of different initiatives that I'll talk about, and even ones that I won't have time to go into. Our inspiration for the Data Rescue Project was the efforts in 2016 and 2017 to protect environmental data. So that was really the focus in 2017, 2017 was environmental and climate data from possible deletion. At that time, many of us felt a rising urgency to safeguard federal government's digital output in response to concerns. So it was an anticipatory kind of rescue. It was meant to be in case they were going to target those kinds of digital outputs. And that was the year in which many of us started using that phrase, data rescue. Many of us were doing data rescue events at in different places at our institutions. This year in 2025, librarians, archivists, researchers, and others have come together to respond again. And the organizations on this slide have worked together to rescue and preserve data, as well as tackle broader questions about our federal statistical system. So a few of these I want to point out, because I will be talking about them a little bit later. One is Safeguarding Research and Culture. Safeguarding Research and Culture is actually a group, distributed group, but has a main point in Berlin. And it's a distributed group across the globe. So it's people from all over other countries who are very concerned about what's happening here in the US. as well as what might be happening in other countries. Public Environmental Data Partners is a coalition of organizations that was organized by the Environmental Data Governance Initiative. And they are the leaders when it comes to environmental data and environmental tools. So they're really the ones who kind of take charge in that area, and we defer to them a lot when it comes to environmental data. And then America's Data Index is another initiative where they're not focused so much on preservation of data, but they're looking at the broader landscape and the possible manipulation of data over time. So if you haven't gone to them, I would encourage you to take a look at all of these groups. I have a little slide at the end when I share the slides that has links to the different groups. So data rescue is born out of crisis, but it's become something larger. And we're still in crisis. I don't know. When I wrote that, I was like, but I think we really were born out of a crisis moment in February 2025. Now what we're talking about is preservation, civic responsibility, and community. And thanks to the efforts of our volunteers and these organizations, as well as the others who came before us, like End of Term Web Archive and more, the Data Rescue Project exists. So today I'm going to talk about the lessons I believe I've learned, and maybe we've learned from these moments, both in 2017 and again in this year, and what these lessons tell us about the future of public data, libraries, and even democracy. So I have 7 lessons. Some reflect our experiences as data librarians, and I am by training a data librarian. Others challenge us to think more broadly about advocacy, infrastructure, and global responsibility. As a whole, they provide a path from a moment of urgency to sustainable long-term practices. These lessons are rooted in our professional practice, but they also extend outward to the civic and global nature of our work. So let's start with what librarians know best, especially this community. This one may seem obvious, but when I think about data rescues, I don't really start with servers or scripts. When I think about them, I think about librarians. Librarianship's professional practices based on metadata, provenance, and description are foundational to the rescue efforts. Before anything can be copied, scraped, or mirrored, it needs to be described. It has to be documented. And that documentation is something librarians know better than anyone. We understand that a data set without context is just noise. Documentation is not an afterthought, it's the first act of preservation. And that's why data librarians need to be at the heart of this work. And it's really interesting. I've anecdotally had people who are outside of our community say to me, "Are you getting the documentation? Are you getting the metadata?" And I'm like, "Oh yes, we are getting it." So an example, you can see this exemplified in the ways that the different data librarian organizations work together to create the Data Rescue Project and our data rescue workflows. We drew on expertise from IASSIST. Again, I'm the secretary of IASSIST, RDAP. We have members of RDAP who are very active, RDA, as well as the Data Curation Network. We brought together librarians who knew about government data, subject specialists who knew about data from specific agencies, and data curators and managers who had checklists to guide volunteers rescuing data. So the key point here is that documentation matters. It's not busy work or a side task, it's the core act of preservation. And without it, our rescue effort would collapse. Moreover, adequate documentation can help us with the challenges of duplication. In February, many groups were rescuing CDC data that was important to their work, but they were doing so without real coordination and careful workflows. And that was what really spawned, I think, the Data Rescue Project, was that moment of seeing people kind of grabbing CDC data and hoarding it. And at first we were quite concerned about that duplication of effort. But we realized over time, and especially over these 9 months, that with coordination, duplication is not always a negative outcome. That brings us to the second lesson. The model of one primary digital artifact isn't sustainable. We need distributed copies, especially for data that is politically sensitive. In fact, duplication is preservation insurance. We are concerned about one institution becoming a single point of failure in this political climate. Multiple copies in multiple places increases resilience, or lots of copies keep stuff safe, and we've been using that more and more this year. And in this year, this is especially true for federal government information. But duplication only works when paired with coordination, so the effort isn't wasted and we have a clear understanding of provenance. An example is our efforts to create backup copies of ERIC, or the Education Resources Information Center, sponsored by the Institute of Education Sciences. ERIC is not a traditional data set and is not what we first focused on when we got started, but it's a significant resource. When concerns emerged that ERIC was being defunded or potentially removed, multiple groups stepped in to help save the database content. One of our DRP volunteers, who I only know as Crizzo, single-handedly submitted 500,000 PDF links to the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine. To ensure continued access to the publications in a user-friendly format, Crizzo developed a lightweight rescue catalog called Erica, which you can see on the right. It's the green screenshot, which lists all PDFs with their basic metadata. In addition, a bulk data dump of 600 gigabytes of ERIC torrent is available from psyop.net, which is a torrent tracker developed by our friends at Safeguarding Research and Culture. Moreover, the complete ERIC metadata, including the additional 1.5 million catalog entries for the publications not hosted on ERIC, so not the PDFs, is also available as a research data set on Zenodo, compiled by a librarian at the California College of the Arts. So I think this project is an effective case study in duplication. And while ERIC has been saved for now, we don't think the work is futile. We have backups in multiple places of parts of a critical database for the education community. And if anything were to happen in the future, the documents would still be available. This duplication works because we came together to document the various projects that had the same aim. But that kind of coordination requires some kind of visibility, and that leads us to lesson 3. DRP, the Data Rescue Project, is not the only group involved in data rescue efforts. There are others that I mentioned: PEDP, Safeguarding Research and Culture, as well as individual organizations, non-NGOs, have been quite active rescuing their own data, as well as even individual people who we've found through various networks. Across these efforts, we've had fundamental questions, such as who is rescuing what, where is it being stored, and when will it be available? In 2017, it wasn't always clear where the data was backed up across different institutions. And this year, we wanted to give rescuers, librarians, and the public an idea of the broader landscape, who has done what, and where the backups are going. Of course, as a librarian, I love catalogs and finding aids. I don't know if I love catalogs. I like finding aids. And with the assistance of volunteers, the Data Rescue Project built a data rescue tracker. The tracker is a spreadsheet format. It's built in base row, and it's a catalog of the data rescues that are happening across various organizations. And so it includes our data, includes data from the PDP, and data from other groups. I love the shout out in the chat to cataloging. That's great. We also worked with a think tank called New America to create the Data Rescue Project portal. And this portal provides a user interface for discovering backups of our data. So it sits on top of our base row as a more user-friendly interface. Anyone can access the portal to browse and search across rescues. So transparency about our rescues showed us what had been backed up and let us concentrate on what is missing. But it also helped to build trust amongst the organizations and the volunteers as we were working together to create these tools. So we were working completely as volunteers on these large projects that required many people to come together and effectively create something. It's quite exciting, but that requires a lot of trust building. So that leads me to lesson 4. Those organizations and volunteers are what have kept the work going. In various physical rooms and in Zooms, we haven't just been saving files. We've been building networks of trust, solidarity, and purpose, especially in these trying times. Early in the process, I spoke with some PEDP leaders about the feasibility of in-person data rescue events. I was wondering, considering the pace at which we were needed to do things, whether or not data rescue events made sense. in-person data rescue events made sense. And Jonathan Gilmore, who's a PEDP leader, made an important point. He said that data rescue events were just as crucial for community building as the data sets themselves. Volunteers showed up not only to save files, but to meet others who cared enough to come, you know. Those connections lasted and helped to build networks of solidarity that I really have outlived the urgency of earlier this year. And I can't talk about community without talking about our steering committee. Through the past very challenging 9 months, we've worked to support and hold up each other. And we have done this, I think, in a very democratic way. So I don't know that people really understand how many people are a part of our steering committee. We have 8 people who are very active. Tess was mentioned in the chat. We have Sebastian, Lena, Amy, Kathleen, Hallie, and Michaela, all of us who come from different parts of the data librarian community. And we have been working to support and hold each other up throughout this time period. This was even as we were concerned about the possibility of retaliation and the need to protect each other, especially in the early days, which required in some cases not talking about who was part of the steering committee because of that. In addition, we supported multiple universities in planning data rescue events. I'll just give a shout out to the ones I know about. Washington University Libraries in particular has held several events. Other schools that held events include Cornell, Northwestern, Georgetown, and GWU. Those events helped people build community and raise awareness of the importance of public data. I've talked to groups that said they've enjoyed working on data rescues in the proximity of others, like actually in person in the same room with other people. And I think those have served as critical complements to the asynchronous rescues we do primarily in Data Rescue Project. One of my favorite ways this community has been represented is through a data sonification project created by Will Clary. Unfortunately, I didn't click the sound when I came into this, so I'm not going to be able to play it for you to hear it. But I want you to go back to this when you have a chance. It's a really cool work of art. So data sonification is the presentation of data as sound. As Clary wrote about this recording, each beep is a data set rescued, and each pitch is tied to the size of the data set. When threats to publicly available data are announced, so mostly it was executive orders, you'll hear a klaxon, which is kind of like a buzzer sound. And with the arrival of each threat, you can audibly recognize DRP's response as the rescue rate increases. And this follows the timeline of our work. I encourage you to forward, when you get the link, to forward to 40 seconds. I can play this later as well, but that's March and April when there were a lot of executive orders coming through targeting specific agencies and offices. The beauty of this work of art and data is that you can hear the frantic work of the community as the news of changes and takedowns were happening. The lesson here is that community is the key to preservation. The relationships we build are as vital as the data sets we save. So for lesson 5, I'll shift from how we did our work to why we did it. The work has a deeper meaning when people come together as a community. It stops just being technical preservation and it becomes civic action. It becomes a democratic responsibility, and it becomes a public statement that data belongs to everyone. As I've said since the beginning of this, maintaining access to our nation's data is part of a healthy democracy. We've been building a shared understanding of why this data matters. And the Data Rescue Project is a form of civic stewardship that promotes the idea that public data is a public good that should remain publicly available. As an example of our advocacy role, we've been working to raise awareness of the federal statistical system and of the challenges the system faces. In late January 2025, Hansi Luang, a reporter at NPR, published a story titled "Experts Warn About the Crumbling Infrastructure of Federal Government Data." And it talked about the challenges facing the BEA, Census Bureau, and others. He also cites the former BLS Commissioner Eric Grosjean, who said that like roads and bridges, the federal statistical system is indispensable, but usually overlooked. She's compared its current state to crumbling infrastructure that still functions, but has visible cracks. So interestingly, this article was published a week before the current administration began taking down data. The concern at the time wasn't the accuracy of the data itself. That's something that's emerged over the summer in the rhetoric of the accuracy of the data. But it was about at that time, it was about the infrastructure needed to collect and maintain it. So reform of the federal statistical system has been challenging because of the decentralized nature of the system and its underfunding. We know that changes need to be made, and those discussions have been ongoing for a long time, and it's definitely since pre-pandemic. But that doesn't mean that the data itself is compromised. It just means that our federal infrastructure is vulnerable as physical infrastructure. It's subject to technological, economic, and as we've seen this year, political pressures. So we've been working across the community to raise awareness of public data users about the system's benefits and its vulnerabilities. And really the focus is trying to make people more aware of the existence of the system so that it's a known infrastructure rather than something that's taken for granted. And we try to do this through our Blue Sky, through our newsletters, and through talks like this one. And then we also have these guest posts that are we're doing through in connection with AppDo and some other organizations that focus on the importance of federal data. And I encourage you to read these if you haven't. They're quite fun. There's a whole egg analogy or metaphor that's going throughout them that's quite entertaining. Our next lesson is connected to that of vulnerability. This year isn't the first time we've seen data sets and government information become vulnerable. We are also not the only country dealing with these challenges. The reality of those statements has led me to believe that we need a rapid response infrastructure for data rescues. Rescuers in 2017 were making it up as they went along, and they had some guideposts, but for the most part, they were the pioneers. In 2025, we have the advantage of their roadmap. We were also fortunate to have support from members of Saving Cultural Ukrainian Heritage Online, also known as SUCHO, a group that worked to preserve the Ukrainian digital heritage at the start of the war in 2022. But we shouldn't be constantly reinventing the wheel in the middle of a crisis or trying to spin up things as a crisis begins. We as a community, and this is when I say we, I say the steering committee and as well as our volunteers really want to be prepared for the future. So one of the primary ways we prepare is to develop possibilities for community coordination and governance. And a few environmental organizations in the Data Rescue Project met 2 weeks ago to discuss this question, all agreeing that some form of long-term coordination would be helpful. Hopefully more information will come out about those plans in the next few weeks, but there are several efforts like that across the communities of people who are interested in public data. We at the DRP are also looking at what products we can leave behind after this moment. We would like to provide future communities with the tools to help them do rapid response data rescues. And as a start, members of our steering committee, especially Lena, Bowman, Michaela, and Amy have created a toolkit for volunteers wanting to put on data rescue events. This toolkit can continue to exist past this current year and into the current situation, and something that others might be able to use in the future. We're also working to create documentation of our approaches, our best practices that can be passed on to others. But the ultimate lesson is that we need standing coordination and governance, not just spontaneous volunteer mobilization when crises happen. So as we look to the future, it's tempting to think of data rescue as a uniquely American story rooted in our federal statistical system, our legislation, and our politics. And there are elements of it that are going to be uniquely American. However, the vulnerability of public data is a global concern. So this is the final lesson. Since the early days of the Data Rescue Project, international news outlets have been curious about our work and about our situation in the US. One of the earliest articles about data rescue was in Le Monde, so one of the major French publications. In addition, colleagues in Canada have explored strategies for safeguarding their own at-risk data sets and have created a group similar to Data Rescue Project. Librarians have organized sessions about data rescue and alternative data sources at Oxford University, and other universities in the UK, as well as in Sweden at KTH Stockholm. Moreover, Sucho has shown us what rapid global collaboration can look like in the face of war. So these examples remind us that the challenge of preserving public knowledge is transnational. Climate data, health statistics, migration records are not just national assets, they are a global public good. When one country loses access, the loss ripples far beyond its borders. That means librarians worldwide are allies in this work. We must strengthen global preservation networks, share tools and standards, and treat every rescue as part of a transnational effort to safeguard the international public's right to know. So lesson 7 is this: the fight to save public data is not just about one nation's democracy, it's about a shared global responsibility. So what have we learned? I'm going to bring this all together, and I'm happy that we'll have a lot of time to have discussion. First, the librarians bring the documentation. We are the ones who really know how to do this work best, but we need to do it in coordination with others, and we need to understand that coordination and duplication can build resilience in our systems. 3, transparency builds trust. Trying to be open about what we're doing helps to build that kind of trust. And this was a challenge we faced early on in February, was knowing what was going on in the community and how to get the word out about different efforts. 4 is how that, this community is what sustains the work. It's the community, the people who have gotten to know each other very well over the past 9 months and who work together incredibly well. 5, civic stewardship is what gives it meaning. 6, rapid response requires preparation. And 7, this is a global concern. So the real lesson is this, in my mind: every act of data rescue is both a technical and a public action. We're preserving not just bytes, but the public's right to know. Our attempts to help to safeguard trust, to help to safeguard trust and build community across borders. So what we're doing is building that community, not just across borders, but also across professions. We have people coming to us from not just the library community, but from research community, from the public, from a wide range of professions. This week at SEDLS, several presentations will provide possible actions to incorporate lessons that I've talked about into your work. My call for you is threefold. So I have 3 things that I would suggest doing if you're interested in helping. 1 is to commit. This could be committing to the principles of better data management. I think that's in some ways an action that is, that commitment is an important action in itself. But you can also come and help us save an at-risk data set. You can connect by plugging into our community, our efforts or the efforts of PEDP or others. We try to amplify all of the groups that are working in this area. It's not just about us, it's about all of us working together. And then advocate by speaking up on campus and in your community. Remind people over and over that public data is a public good. So that's our calling as data librarians, not only to catalog and to preserve, but to stand as stewards of public knowledge. Because when we save what counts, we're not just saving data, we're saving democracy itself. So thank you. And if you'd like to get involved, contact us at the Data Rescue Project. I look forward to discussion.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Lynda. All right, so we have this session for another 30 minutes or so. So if you have a question, if you have, maybe you've participated in some of this work as well, maybe some stories or additional personal lessons that you want to share as well, that's totally fine. You can either put up your hand, come off mic, put your questions in the chat, and we'll go from there.
And thank you for putting the data sonification link in the chat. Sorry, I did not click the right button to get the sound to work before I came in.
You want to try playing it?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can definitely do that. Let me. while people are putting questions in.
Thanks, Chantal. She said incredible work. Well done to all involved. Marla said, we may have to add the data sonification to our data related YouTube playlist.
Yeah,
for sure.
You should. So it's really quiet.
I can hear it.
So you'll hear this, like, most of these beeps are the data sets that are being rescued, and then you'll hear a sound that's like, that's the klaxon. And where it gets really fun is down here later on in the, let me pull it down. So you can hear what happens in March and April, or March primarily. Yeah. So what happened there, and I can tell you the first time I ever heard this, I was in at iAssist, and somebody, the Will Clary was presenting on it, and he played that part where it's the executive order that called for the dismantling of Voice of America and some of the other offices. And that's when we went, and IMLS was part of that. So we went and rescued a whole bunch of data right after that. And that, it actually made my heart rate increase as I was sitting in. It was an emotional reaction, a physical reaction to hearing that moment kind of portrayed in this video. So I know there's some people here who have done data rescue events. If you wanted to come on and talk about your experience with those and how it's, give any tips for people who might be interested in data rescue events too, I encourage you to do that. Yeah, this is great. So Lynda has a great question. How do you find who the partners are? Then how do you start conversations with those partners? So in the beginning, what happened was we created a Google Doc that many people, that eventually became our website, but it was a Google Doc that was being spread around, created on February 3rd, just as a way to remind people of the various things that were happening, like in the term Web Archive, ICPSR's Data Lumos, and other things that support the data rescue community. And what was really great about that Google Doc is it became kind of crowdsourced because people started putting their own efforts into the Google Doc. And that's how we found out about safeguarding research and culture. That's how we found out about I'm trying to remember, SIOP.net, their tool. A few others were like that, where we found out about them just because they put their information onto this shared Google Doc. So that really was the starting point for figuring out who the partners are and what kinds of things they were working on. There's also been a group of people who were bringing people together. So OSF brought a bunch of us together early on, as well as Maggie at ICPSR tried to get different partners and identify who was doing this. And so it's through word of mouth. I mean, if you think of it as snowballing, it's an interview snowballing. In a lot of ways, it's the same kind of idea that we were just trying to get as many people into the room. And I think that's what's been most effective, is it's not been about, okay, this is my territory, stay out of my lane. It's been about, who do we bring in, because we need more people involved with this. We need to be able to build awareness. And then when we start conversations, I mean, honestly, it's just me or others in our group going and emailing whoever we can find, either on their website or through word of mouth, or through connections, emailing them and asking them if they want to meet. So most of the past half year has been, oh gosh, more than that now. This past year has been meeting with people just to get to know them and what they're doing. That's how Save Our Signs, which if you haven't heard about Save Our Signs, it is our effort to save the national park signs. And that I can put in the chat in a second, but Save Our Signs came out of this attempt to just talk to as many people as we could. Yeah, and then, oh yeah, Michelle's right. Some people were referred over. I mean, certainly we've gotten lots of referrals to
people asking about us or wanting to know more about what we've been doing. So data librarians have certainly referred us to our people to the various groups. Yeah, and to Erin's point about RDEP-led rescue events, and the office hours. So we do have office hours every other week. Sometimes we'll have a couple of people attend, sometimes it will be a big group, but it's really meant to be a time where we can talk about the rescues we're working on or other efforts. Save Our Signs is going to have a big launch on October 13th. So we're really excited about, they're going to have an announcement going out October 13th about the work they're doing. So I encourage you to take a look or be on the lookout for that, or sign up for our newsletter, and we'll put it about the information about Save Our Signs as well. But the RDAP events, we are looking to try to do another data rescue event in November. That right now, Lena is trying to organize one of those, so we'll see if we can get that. Yeah, that's the resources page, as well as the current events page that Marla put in the resources page. That's what grew out of the Google Doc, was our website. What Google Doc's still out there. If you ever want to look at it, you're welcome to. It's just it's defunct at this point. Yes, and to Marla's point about how rapid the project morphed from a shared Google Doc to a website, that was really with the help of Sucho. We would not have been able to create the website, we have an email, we have a website, we have a communications channel called Mattermost. We would not have been able to do that without the support of Sucho, and financial support of one of our steering committee members' employers. We wouldn't have been able to do any of that. So it's been amazing to see how much people have stepped up and helped us to create these things and continue this presence that we have.
Did you reach out to Sucho, or did they reach out to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I am part of PEGI, which is Preserving Electronic Government Information, and James Jacobs is a member of that, who works with Quinn, who is on Sucho's steering committee. So it wasn't so much that they reached out to me, that we kind of reached out at the same time. And we're connected through James Jacobs. So I know there was early on in December, there was a group of from Sucho, as well as some others, trying to figure out what to do. And then the kind of iAssist came in later on, because we were also waiting to see who was going to kind of respond. And so that's when we got together, and we were finally like, we got to do something. We can't just keep waiting for this to do something. So I think that's kind of my point, is it wasn't that anything formal. A lot of this community building and the connections was just through the networks that we have. Certainly data librarians know a lot of data librarians, and so we're able to get out the word and get to know each other that way. Any blowback federally or from a university asking you to stop? We haven't seen any blowback federally. I think there's definitely always concerns about some of the mass scraping efforts that were happening, not necessarily from us, but from partners, the impact that might have on some of the agency websites. And so we've been trying to make connections with people who are working in the agencies, but we also want to honor the fact that they are in a very precarious spot, and we don't want to put anybody at risk. So that's the only place where we've seen kind of a little bit of, not challenge, but just something we have to keep in mind and think about. In terms of our universities, I think that most universities are very supportive. It is our goal, our mission is to preserve information and to make information accessible. That's what we do as librarians, and this is part of our mission in Data Rescue Project. So I think because we have that mission, a lot of the universities have been able to support it. Certainly my university early on was not wanted to not have the university mentioned at any point in connection to the Data Rescue Project. That's because my university has more of a spotlight on it than maybe some others. But overall, I think people recognize that what we're doing is preserving access to information and preserving data.
Do you have any thoughts on encouraging first-year students and other newcomers, the world of data and research, to join data rescue efforts? That's a great question. I think some of the live guides I've seen have been really great, could be really great tools for talking with first-year students about kind of what's happening. It's definitely a challenging time to be talking about government data and government information, and I don't envy my government information librarian colleagues right now, because I know it's hard. I know it's a really challenging time to do that. But I think maybe not encouraging them to, I wouldn't start with encouraging them to join the data rescue efforts, but I would start with first-year students and teaching them about the federal statistical system and kind of how unique it is and what it does in our country and why it's so important. I think that's really the starting point. And then if they're more interested in what's going on in this political moment, I think that's where we can have those conversations about data rescue efforts. Another way to do this potentially, Ellen, is to think about ways that you can teach students their own personal data management practices and make sure that they kind of have an understanding of why data management is so important. It's not just an afterthought. So that would be my suggestion. I don't know if other people have ideas for Ellen's question. I would love to hear those. So Ashley is asking about recreating dashboards. Yes, that's so Public Environmental Data Partners has been very active in recreating tools. I'm just going to go get their link so that you can have access to that. They have, that is primarily what they've focused on, is not just archiving data sets. That's part of what they do, but they also have been trying to recreate things like FEMA's Future Risk Index. And the other one that's really big is the EPA EJ screen. So those are the kind of tools they're recreating. And the thing to keep in mind about PEDP is that they are a coalition of NGOs and other kinds of researchers in environmental in sciences. And so they have a lot of expertise and actually use these tools consistently. So they have real insider knowledge about the tools and how to rebuild them, which we don't have, right? That's really not our forte. And so we have our own areas of expertise. And that, I think, is a great way for us, where we've been able to help each other, is they focus on those kinds of tools and we focus on archiving data sets. And I think because of our name, we've gotten more attention just because we're more general name. And I think that that's good because we know a lot about where things are. So we play that reference librarian role of, you need to go here, or you need to go to this person if that's what you're interested in. We can't do it, but we know who can do it or how to get you what you need. So a question about some limitations to relying on Wayback Machine for access. I think the Wayback Machine is part of the end of term web archive, which is, I'm going to grab that link, which is the ongoing effort to back up the presidential web. And it's been going on since 2008 with the Obama administration. So in recognition that, as administration changes happen, the websites of the administrations will change. There's always change when it comes to presidential web. What we've seen over this year has been a little more intense, but there is always going to be some kind of change. And so end of term web archive is focused on archiving that and preserving that through the Wayback Machine and University of North Texas, that presidential web. So Wayback Machine, if you go there and look at the end of term web archive crawls, you can navigate through the agencies that way. But when it comes to Wayback Machine, there are limitations to access. And that's something that we definitely recognize that there, more often you have to have the original URL. It can be hard to find something without that original URL. So what we've been doing is things like Erica, where it's building off of what the data that's either in Wayback Machine or in Internet Archive, but it provides a user interface that's a little bit more familiar. So it's not so much that it's, I mean, we work great, or we love working with Internet Archive and Wayback Machine, and that's an important part of this process. But there are some limitations on accessibility for known items and unknown items too. So there's a question about a central place to look at the rescue data sets. That's our portal. It's the best place to go. I'll put the link in the chat. And you will see we have, there's now up to 1,200, over 1,200 data sets, or data rescues, I should say. So these are rescues of data sets across the different data rescue efforts. So feel free to go in there and you can see the different ones that have been rescued. If you look at ERIC, for instance, you'll see, or education, you'll see a whole bunch of different versions of ERIC. And what's really helpful with this, so to give you an example, all the data that we've, a data rescue project has archived has gone into Data Lumos, which is a product created by ICPSR in 2017. So if you are looking for the data rescue project data sets, you can see those in Data Lumos. Let me grab that. Early on, before we created the tracker, there were probably, if you go back in February, you'll see probably 5 different versions of the Department of Education civil rights data. And that was one of the things we were trying to mitigate, just having, people put multiple versions of the same thing in one spot. And rather, if they're we're gonna have duplication, to have it across different formats. So the other place that we work with is called SIOP. And they are scraping, they're doing a lot of scraping of websites. And that's another one that you can use to find backed up data sets and websites. And again, I'll share my slides at the end, and it has links to most of these things that I'm sharing with you. These are great questions. Thank you so much for asking.
Yeah, there was one that was nested in a little bit. It said, what's the National Archives or Library of Congress role in this?
Yeah, so they, again, because of the current situation, I think they have to have some level of neutrality. They're not part of the work that we're doing right now. We have connections in some agencies who can help us and who might be able to answer some questions about accessing public data. And that's the thing to keep in mind. All of this is public data. We do not touch restricted access data. We're not getting into that business. But when it comes to public data, there are some people who have been able to talk to us, but because of the precarity of the environment right now, we can't be very public about who those people are or which agencies they're with.
We're about 10 minutes to break. I'll just do a last call. And if there aren't any last minute burning questions, we can start break early. Oh, another question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the groups, Data Index, is actually monitoring data sets or monitoring as best they can data sets, because this is a really challenging thing to necessarily do. Data Index has been doing this. There's another group, Stat News, I think is the name of it, that I would have to go find, that have been tracking the the modification of data sets. Some of that we know about, so certainly some variables, I think in BRFSS have been changed. But what they do, what the data index does that's really helpful is they look at change requests. So this is when an agency requests for OMB approval to change a data set. And so they've been doing a really good job of tracking those kinds of requests to see what's coming through. They also have been, as well as they can, monitoring the websites and the data collections of various agencies, primarily connected to population studies and surveys, the human surveys. So those are the, provide some insight into modifications or changes or sites that are going down. There's also a group out of University of Minnesota, the same group that works on the Save Our Signs, that is also tracking the deletion of federal government information, primarily looking at websites that have been taken down by the federal government. Yes, so that, Lynda, the question now is, do you have a maintenance plan? Have you discussed a proactive plan for rescue in the future, like how it was in 2016? Yes, I mean, that's something that we want to leave behind for certainly. The speed of the work has been so great over the past 9 months that we're just starting to get to a point where we can kind of step back and do that. Currently, we're working on some figuring out what will be the best infrastructure for housing the plans and the things that we've created so that it can extend into the future. One of the things we don't want to do is connect it to one institution, and mainly because concerns that an institution may not have the same priorities that it would have in 4 or 5 years. So we're trying to figure out ways to make it self-sustainable, which is why we've been doing fundraising, and we have been talking to a lot of funders trying to get money to be able to create a sustainable infrastructure in the long term. Yeah, that's a great, so Anna has a question about the collections of PDFs, fact sheets, et cetera, in the portal. How does the process differ with archiving, preserving these versus data sets? So one of the reasons why you will see that is because we recognize that in addition to the data sets, the government has been amazingly proactive in trying to create usable versions of statistics from major data sets and things that are much more like fact sheets or dashboards, and provide access to data sets in a very user-friendly way. And a lot of those things came down. One example of this is the climate.gov fact sheets. I forget what they're called, snapshots that were on that site. And in themselves, they're not traditional data sets, but they're very useful as data, and they're very useful for people. So we thought that we still wanted to be able to get as much information, get as much of that out as possible, and preserved somewhere. Part of it's the same process. So the workflow we use for data sets is very similar for those kinds of materials. It's just depending on the size of the material, it might be a SIOP or a safeguarding research and culture that's scraping, or it might be us that is trying to do more of the manual work with the data. But the goal is to get as much contextual information into the entries we put into Data Lumos as possible, same as the data sets, so that people can get back to the original data if it's still available. Yeah, so the Marla's point about the research data repositories, a lot of them have this compliance notification. Do we have a sense of the stability? There's these repos, and I feel conflicted when I suggest one for data management plan. Yeah, this is a hard question and not one that we've been able, I mean, because our focus is primarily on agency produced data, and it has not been on, whereas most of these data repositories, or most of the data is going to be research data. So it's a little bit of a challenge for us to be able to handle that particular question. So I don't have a great answer for you. I know there are some places where we've looked to see if there is a need to back up a data repository, but typically those have been agency produced data repositories and not the ones that you're referring to. So I'm sorry, Marla, I don't have an answer to that one right now, or an easy answer to that one, I think. Yeah, I think some of us are trying to figure out. I mean, the big question was whether or not they were going to require institutional repositories that were getting data sets that had NIH funding, whether or not they would require those institutional repositories to include that language. And I know that one institution was asked to do that, but I haven't heard of any other institution that was asked to. So how far back in time? That's a great question. It depends on the data set. It depends on the rescue. It's not that we have one set time. In some cases, what we're getting are the snapshots that are available. We're not going back to. So, for example, if you look at something like I'll just pick one: the American Community Survey or the American Time Use Survey. Those are covered by the archives that are out there. So we have kind of left the archives to do the job that they do so well. So I'm talking about ICPSR, IPMS, as well as others. Those large scale surveys, they really do go far back in time. They have backups for them. And we've also looked, some of you might know Bob Ray Bordelon. He's really helped guide. He's been one of those subject librarians who's helped us guide kind of our understanding of what needs backup, what doesn't, what we could, and where are the alternate sources that we could rely on. And so all of the rescues we do are a discussion about whether or not it's really priority or something that we need to get. So it's a little more complicated than just get all of it. It's much more of a discussion. Has the shutdown affected efforts? It affects the data collection moving forward, and there's a lot of discussions about what that looks like. And certainly Data Index has some really good, I encourage you to get on their newsletter if you haven't, but they have some recent articles that talk about the impact of the shutdown on the kind of work that they're doing and continuing the collection of data over time. I don't think so much the shutdown has impacted us. There was a couple of moments where some sources seemed to go down, but then they came back up. So it's a little unclear that we're seeing an impact at this moment. Now, in the long term, when we see an impact, that might be the case. But we have some data. We have an inventory of rescues, things that we're currently working on that we are actively backing up. And every so often, things will get added to that. But that pace has slowed down quite a bit because a lot of stuff has been backed up. So it started to slow down a little bit in some cases. Now what we're dealing with are much more kind of bigger tools or bigger projects. So like the Save Our Signs initiative, we were trying to support that project getting off. We also helped with the Citizens Historians for the Smithsonian project, kind of launching them. So that's been a lot of our focus lately, is really kind of helping other groups do larger projects.
Okay, we're just at 2 minutes, so I think we'll cut here. And again, just want to thank you so much, Lynda. If you guys are able to come on video and do some clapping or virtual clapping or waving hands, that would be amazing. I know for speakers, it can be a bit hard looking at static faces, but we know that there's lots of appreciative faces behind those video photos. So thank you so much again, Lynda. And
yeah, thank you so much for having me and for listening. And please feel free to reach out if you have more questions, or want to get in touch with us.
Awesome. Thank you. And so we'll go to break now for about, is it 15 minutes?
This is a longer one. We come back in an hour, I think.
1 hour.
We come back at 1:40. So we have 40 minutes. And the next two short talks are going to also be about data rescue. So we're going to be continuing this conversation. So take a break, get some lunch, and come back in a bit. I will pop up the that reminder slide, and it'll be the Zoom room again.